Us a little bit about your family situation as you understand it, because I think for quite a long time you had no communication at all with.
Yeah, of course. Hi everyone. So my family is very cool right now. My family have my mother, my brother, my aunts, my grandparents. I didn't have connection with them for 5 days. Yesterday I have received a message from my mom via SMS. Where there is no water, no heating, or light. Yeah.
We'll just put that up on screen, and do you think you could tell us, as you say, what's in it, because it's in Ukrainian, we won't be able to read it, but it must just have been such a relief even getting this message.
Yeah, so we just need your help and support. It means a lot for us, for my family, and every Ukrainian resident.
Tell us what she said in the text.
She said that there is no connection, no water, no heating. We need your help. You have to search, you have to look for help in Mariupol somewhere because they cannot struggle anymore, they cannot take it anymore. They need our help.
Now, we also have a photo of you and your family at Happy Times, about a year ago in Mariupol, I think. Everybody in that picture, I think, is there. Apart from, I think, is he his dad? I think he's the man in the second. He's in the suit, isn't he? Second on the left. Lovely photograph. I mean, it must feel like another world when you look at that photograph now, given what's happening. Dad, I think, is a sailor, isn't he? So he wouldn't necessarily be back at home right now, but everybody else is, and in particular your grandparents. You were at one point really worried about them, weren't you?
Yeah, that's right.
What happened?
I have received from the news the message that their house was bombed out,
Oh boy.
and yeah, and I had a connection with them for 5 days, and I was really nervous. I thought that they were not alive anymore. But happily, my father said to me today that they are with my mother, and everything is fine. They are in a safe place, and yeah.
So it must be one of the best bits of news you've ever received.
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
We've got a photo, I think, of your grandparents with you as well. This is them. There's another photo, I think, of them. Here we go, and this is with Grandma and Granddad. This is at your prom. You look beautiful, if you don't mind my saying so. It's a lovely photograph. You came to study in Germany. I guess your family were excited about you studying and so on. And then this happens. It must be very hard to be away right now.
Yeah, that's really hard. I was also by a psychologist because of my mental health. I needed support. I cannot even imagine how hard it's for my family right now. So yeah.
And I'm sorry they can't see this interview, but you'll have to make sure they know that you've spoken to the world on their behalf. What is it your mum is saying? What help does she think that Ukraine needs? Do they expect any help from the outside world?
Yeah, of course, they expect help. My mother wants that the whole world will hear about the situation and the truth. Um, my family and every resident of Mariupol and in Ukraine, they need a green corridor, they need humanitarian help, but it's not possible right now. So our Ukrainian soldiers were trying to help our citizens, yeah, but Russian occupants didn't allow any humanitarian help to pass by, and they were just shooting through these green corridors, and yeah.
Yeah, this was the ceasefire. We've had two attempts at ceasefire, haven't we? Both of which have collapsed. Exactly as you say, to help people like your mum in Mariupol. What sort of what's been happening in Germany? I mean, how are you finding? What are people saying to you? How are you finding your German friends? How they feel about the situation? Are there things happening in Dortmund? Are you hearing about other protests and things like that happening?
Yeah, of course. In Germany, there are so many protests. Every person supports Ukraine. Every friend of mine supports me and my family. We have been donating for several days for our Ukrainian army, for refugees. Yeah, so everyone are really worried about the situation, and everyone wants to help Ukraine.
Well, that's good to know. Anastasia Kuliani, thank you so much for speaking to us. I hope you will keep talking to your friends and reaching out to people, and they'll be there to support you, because it must feel very lonely right now. And I hope you get more text messages soon, and hopefully hear your mum's voice soon, which would be the best thing of all. Keep in touch with us, tell us what's happening, and perhaps we'll speak to you again at some point. But thank you very much for now for talking to us.
Thank you so much.
Now, as we mentioned earlier, a second attempt to help people out of the besieged southern city of Mariupol has failed, just as Anastasia was telling us there, because of course her mum and her grandparents were affected by that, and other members of her family. Both sides blame each other for failing to observe the ceasefire. The Red Cross, which is trying to organise the humanitarian operation, said the city is witnessing devastating scenes of human suffering. A number of other cities are also under intense bombardment. Our correspondent Sarah Rainsford has more.
When night falls, they keep the lights off here, in the hope that will hide them from the Russian bombs. Families who fled the fighting in Kharkiv to a nearby town, still too close to feel safe.
This is with my friends in metro.
15-year-old Nika has left behind her city, her friends, and the father she loves, and she's struggling.
Oh, thank God I'm alive. I can't sleep normally. I'm sleeping 2 or 3 hours every day because I heard bangs, and I'm afraid. I start shaking because I think, yeah, they're here, and it's very bad.
It's not only Kharkiv under attack. In Volnovakha to the southeast, whole streets are in ruins. The fighting was meant to stop today to give civilians a chance to get out. But a local MP told me Russian forces had broken the ceasefire for a second day. Russia said it would provide a safe corridor, Dmitry Lubinets said, but they were firing along the route. And there was no let-up at all in Mariupol. Imagine living under this. With no power and little water now, or food. So the buses that were sent to rescue thousands stood empty.
In the first days of the war, we counted dozens of dead. Now it's hundreds, and it'll soon be thousands. But they don't even give us a chance to count, because the shelling hasn't stopped for 6 days.
People were supposed to be bussed here, 3 hours north, to Zaporizhia, still firmly under Ukrainian control. There is no shelling here yet, but it's too quiet, almost deserted. We spotted armed police doing spot checks. Then one patrol yelled at us to pull over.
3 armed officers pointed their guns at us, made us open the car doors, wanted to check who we were. They asked us to put our hands in the air. Once they saw we were journalists, they were fine, but it is getting really nervy here.
The fear comes before the fighting, but both are now spreading here every day. Sarah Rainsford, BBC News, Zaporizhia.
The Director General of the International Agency for Atomic Energy, the IAEA, has said he's extremely concerned of reports that several nuclear sites have been separated and are not in contact with the Ukrainian nuclear regulator. Rafael Grossi said the Ukrainian authorities had had trouble contacting staff at the Zaporizhia nuclear plant, the biggest in the country. That's the one that Russian forces have taken control of. You remember there was a fire there last week during their attack. They apparently have switched off some mobile networks and the internet. Our correspondent Bethany Bell in Brussels gave us the latest.
The UN's nuclear watchdog says the head of the IAEA says he's extremely concerned by the situation because he says the current situation at the nuclear plant, which was of course seized by Russian forces on Friday, he says that Ukrainian staff are still operating it technically, but they are now having to get approval for any orders, anything they want to do technically at the plant from the Russian commander who seized it. And he said that contravenes safety, pillars of safety and security, which say that Ukraine say that mobile phone communications have been cut, some of them also email and fax. So it's hard to get reliable communication, and Mr. Grossi said this is also a big problem, and it's also the case at Chernobyl. And he said he was also concerned about the staff at Chernobyl who haven't been able to rotate out since the 23rd of February. And he's again repeated his offer to go to Ukraine to negotiate between the sides about this issue to ensure that the safety and security of these nuclear sites can be maintained.
US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has said the United States is considering providing Poland with jets to replace ones that Poland could then supply to Ukraine. Yesterday, President Zelensky appealed to the US Senate for Russian-made planes. The reason is his military knows how to fly them. James Landau reports.
What Ukraine wants is more air cover, more planes like these keeping the skies free from Russian attacks. And so now there's a plan for the West to give more jets to Ukraine for its own pilots to fly. America's top diplomat was visiting Moldova today, where he confirmed Poland might give some of its warplanes to Ukraine and get some American fighter jets in return.
We are looking actively now at the question of airplanes that Poland may provide to Ukraine, and looking at how we might be able to backfill should Poland decide to produce those, supply those planes.
What Ukraine says it really wants is a no-fly zone enforced by NATO in an attempt to slow the Russian onslaught on its cities. But NATO said no, fearing it would trigger a wider European war.
Most of the destruction is coming from artillery. It's not coming from Russian aircraft. And then if we were to police a no-fly zone, it means that we'd probably have to take out Russian defence systems, and we would have NATO aircraft in the air alongside Russian aircraft, and then the potential of shooting them down, and then that leads to an escalation.
And amid the fighting, the diplomacy continues. This morning, Israel's Prime Minister briefed his cabinet on his talks yesterday with Vladimir Putin.
Even if the chance is not great, and as soon as there's even a small opening, I see this as our moral obligation to make every effort.
And all the while, the flow of refugees out of Ukraine continues to grow. Today, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, Filippo Grandi, said they number more than 1.5 million people, what he described as the fastest growing refugee crisis in Europe since World War II.
I think help of other country is very important for us, really. It's really good.
As Western economic sanctions begin to have an impact in Moscow, Visa and MasterCard announced that they would cease their operations in Russia. Banks in Russia insisted that cards issued by them would continue to work. James Landau, BBC News.
The Pope has urged Russia to guarantee humanitarian corridors are maintained in order to evacuate civilians. Addressing crowds from the Vatican, Pope Francis countered Russian assertions that this is a military operation, saying it's all leading to death, destruction and misery.
In Ukraine, rivers of blood and tears are flowing. This is not just a military operation, but a war that sows death, destruction and misery. The victims are ever more numerous, as well as people fleeing, especially mothers and children. The need for emergency humanitarian assistance is growing dramatically hour by hour in that part of the country. I address a heartfelt appeal so humanitarian corridors are ensured and access to aid in the areas under siege is guaranteed and facilitated to offer life-saving help to our brothers and sisters suffering under the bombs and from fear. I thank all those who are welcoming